Welcome back to John Redmann, Power of Attorney. Many folks have asked questions about dealing with the financial burden of not having income. With good reason. People are stressed about everything from keeping up with their rent to putting food on their table. For some, bankruptcy suddenly seems like an option. Our next guest, Attorney Bill Charbonnier, has been a consumer advocate, assisting folks in this area for over 40 years. We are pleased to have him here with us to share his insights. Bill, thank you for being on the show.
John, thank you for inviting me.
Great. So let's get started. For business owners and for individuals, what is your primary message to those who are feeling the financial strain and accruing debt from this pandemic?
Well, the first thing they've got to do is use the money that they've got on the important things. When you're limited, and there's only enough money to go around, you don't want to go spend it on the stuff that it doesn't need to be spent on. I think one of the things that people need to realize right away is if they have any kind of automatic draft on something unimportant, they've got to go and cancel that with the bank immediately, because otherwise the money's going to come out and you're not going to get it back. That's going to be any kind of a finance company loan or anything that's unessential. Get that auto draft stopped. Now, there's things that are essential, and we could go over that if you have any specific questions as to what should be paid and what shouldn't be.
Okay, and we want to get into that, and we have a bunch of questions lined up, and so we do want to get into that, but let me get to the specific questions I have following up on that. For example, what kind of debt obligations are paused right now because of the pandemic? Mortgage, rent payments, loans from lending institutions. What can you comment about that?
Well, none of the payments are paused, but enforcement action has been paused by the CARES Act and also by the governor's proclamation. Additionally, the courts, both the Orleans Parish Civil District Court and the Jefferson Parish 24th Judicial District Court, have shut down a lot of the procedures that they're doing. So even though the payments may be due, for example, there isn't going to be enforcement action on federally backed mortgages because the CARES Act prohibited that. There can be enforcement action, and unfortunately, we're seeing that there are still foreclosures that are being filed right now, because even though the courthouse is closed, the mortgage companies can file electronically. But when there is a foreclosure normally when there's no pandemic, when there's no state of emergency, it generally takes about 4 to 6 months from the time a foreclosure petition is filed to the time a house is sold. The sheriff doesn't come there and start throwing people's furniture and possessions out on the street. It takes time to do that, and there's usually time to follow up on options such as Chapter 13s or sometimes even a Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for that. But just in general, and we were talking about this before we filmed today, just the whole question of what do you do if you have very little income or very little money that's coming in and you have all these financial concerns? There's a bit of an analysis that you were recommending for individuals and business owners. What should they do with making determinations about what to do with their bills and making a determination? Could you comment on that, please?
Sure. The two things that are most important, the most important things to pay, number one is rent. Now, for people who aren't buying a house or don't own a house, for people who have to pay rent, whether it's a business or whether it's a home, if that rent isn't paid, there's going to be an eviction coming around. It's been stayed right now. The courts aren't handling evictions locally right now. But it's going to happen, and what the pandemic is doing is just, it may be putting a slight brake on everything. It's not forgiving it. There's no rent forgiveness. The same for automobile payments. Automobile payments are vehicle payments. If a business has vehicles that it needs and is paying on them, if it doesn't make those payments, these vehicles can be repossessed. And that has not, although no one's doing it right now, sooner or later you got to pay the piper on. So rent and car payments are two of the things that should be paid. When there's limited funds, that's what should be paid. Now, a house note, sure, you're going to have to pay that, but it takes time to foreclose, and people generally have a little bit more leeway.
What about credit card bills? What about other bills you get in the mail, from everything from your credit cards to money you owe on anything that's not your house note?
Well, those should be low priority, because when it comes down to survival mode, you're going to need a roof over your head, and you're going to have a means of transportation to get to the doctor, the grocery, and to work. As far as the credit cards are concerned, the credit cards are the easiest thing to take care of down the line. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors that the credit card people put out, and true, that it can be damage to the credit rating. But the bottom line is credit card payments, local finance company payments where there's no collateral, things like that should be pretty much at the bottom of the line as far as payment.
Okay. Next question has to do with bankruptcy. The viewer asked, if I wouldn't have considered filing for bankruptcy if not for the pandemic, should I wait it out and try getting help from the government instead?
It's probably not the best time to file bankruptcy until we find out what's going to be happening. We don't know when the economy is going to reopen. Even if the rest of the country opens up, the mayor of New Orleans has extended the time. So I think it's probably best to see what exactly is going to happen, and to take advantage of any government programs that come about. It is an election year, and my hunch is that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are going to want to see a lot of bankruptcies if they can avoid it.
Okay. Now, next question is, will individuals and businesses be allowed to file for bankruptcy if they decide they need to, maybe after consulting with someone like you, during the COVID quarantine? Aren't the courthouses closed?
The courthouses are closed, but the courts are not. We have electronic filing now. I mean, look at what we're doing. We're having this meeting electronically. And attorneys can file cases without ever setting foot inside the courtroom. So foreclosures can be filed, repossessions can be filed. They're not accepting evictions at this minute, but they'll be coming. But the quick answer, the sweet and easy answer is yes, people can file during the COVID crisis, but it might be better to wait.
Okay. And on that topic, just in general, and this applies probably in times of a pandemic, but also just in general, what are some of the pros and some of the cons of declaring or filing for bankruptcy?
Well, bankruptcy gets rid of your debts. It hurts your credit in the short run. Usually 2 years is the magic number. If you file bankruptcy and keep everything paid on time, for 2 years, you'll qualify for an FHA loan, a house loan, if you pay all your bills on time following bankruptcy. And of course, there's other qualifications. Bankruptcy eliminates debt, and by eliminating debt, it can sometimes help your credit rating a little bit, because credit rating in part is based on your total overall debt. If you have $50,000 worth of debt and then file bankruptcy and get it discharged, you have zero debt. And in some cases, that improves your credit in the short term.
And you mentioned getting rid of your debt, but my understanding from talking about this with you is there's also there's the Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is common, also something called Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Can you describe what those are and what the differences between those two are?
Sure. Chapter 7 is when you're looking for a fresh start. You want to get out from under your debt, and you're not going to try to pay it. Not everybody qualifies for a Chapter 7. You have to be either below the median income for the state, or you have to pass what's called a means test. Chapter 13, on the contrary, is a debt reorganization. The bankruptcy court will give you 5 years to get caught up on your house note as long as you start making the regular monthly payments. And you can redo an automobile loan, especially if the loan is more than 2.5 years. If an automobile loan is more than 2.5 years old, you can reduce the balance of the payable balance of the loan to the actual retail value of the vehicle. And that's a big deal for people who have cars that have lost a lot of value. So with Chapter 13, you make payments for either 3 to 5 years based on your income. And it's for people who have temporarily fallen on bad times, and they're getting back in better times.
Okay. Here's a question that we've heard some talk about. Can creditors, that is people maybe they already have a judgment against you and they're trying to garnish your wages, can creditors take my stimulus check? And if so, is there anything I can do about that if I'm trying to get a stimulus check?
Well, they can take it right now because it is not exempt from seizure. There is a bill pending before the Louisiana legislature. It was introduced by Senator Pat Connick of Harvey that would make the stimulus payments exempt, not only for this, but also future payments for hurricane damages, natural disasters, national emergencies, but it's not exempt right now. The U.S. Trustee's Office has issued a guidance to the trustees directing them not to take it absent exceptional circumstances. But there's at least one of the local bankruptcy trustees who has already stated publicly that she will take the stimulus money under certain circumstances.
Okay. Another bankruptcy question. Does an individual get to keep his or her house if they declare bankruptcy? And if so, do they have to give up their house in the current climate? And there's not alternative housing available is the question.
They don't lose their house if two things are happening. Number one, they're current on all their payments. And number two, there's less than $35,000 of equity in the house. If we have what are called exemptions in Louisiana and every state, and that's what you keep when you file bankruptcy. If your house has less than $35,000 and if you are current on your house payments, you'll keep it. Now, if you're behind in your house payments, you may need to do a Chapter 13 and start the payments again. And people, that's one of the main reasons people do Chapter 13s. It's to either keep a house or to keep a vehicle. And under some circumstances, I mean, even with the situation we have right now, if someone was current or in foreclosure before the pandemic, then there's really no reason for them not to plan on filing the Chapter 13 if they want to keep their property. Because the longer you wait, the payments are still continuing to go up. If you get into a Chapter 13 now, your payment's going to be lower than if you wait another 4 or 5 or 6 months and you're another 4 or 5 or 6 months behind in house payment.
We're starting to run short on time. Unfortunately, we just only have so many minutes in the show. But what are some other ways of dealing with creditors short of filing bankruptcy or other than filing bankruptcy?
Well, before you file bankruptcy, you should always try to work something out with your creditors if possible. There's some creditors that really don't give a damn. We have just today we had some people who wanted to try. They were being sued before the pandemic, the shutdown, and we're trying to negotiate with the bank, but the bank just doesn't want to do it. I think a lot of that's going to change because the economy is going to change, and what banks would not take today, they might take in 6 months. We also don't know what's going to happen. I'm inclined to believe that with this being an election year, there's going to be some incentives that the government makes toward the banks to encourage them the banks and the credit card people to try to encourage them to work things out. But the first thing you do is you try to contact the creditor. If the creditor gives you no alternative, then you may be forced into a bankruptcy or a Chapter 13 to keep your property.
And in order to pursue bankruptcy, they can get a consultation with someone like you and find out their options. Is that typically how people determine if bankruptcy is a wise move or not?
Sure. You really need to, you can go on the internet, but free advice is generally worth what you pay for. And that said, I will tell you that I think most bankruptcy attorneys do in fact give consumers a free consultation. But they don't do the bankruptcy, of course, for free, or else they'd be filing bankruptcy themselves. Almost all of the bankruptcy attorneys in the New Orleans area will give people a free consult for consumers. For businesses, it's different.
There's a charge.
Generally a charge.
Okay. Well, Bill, I'm so grateful to you for sharing your input and your insights into the consumer side of things. Thank you for joining us. This has been very helpful.